it's all set up. So that's good at least.
Less invisible chair. So did you get a hold of Tim? Tim Powell?
I sent him an email.
Yeah, he's on. Everything I say is being transcribed. He's a recursive.
I mean, that's kind of
Can you hear me talking, Valerie?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, good. Do you want to present the chair slides, or do you want me to?
I can do it. I'm
good.
just a bit worried that Paul isn't here, so we don't have a delegate in the room. But
we will
anyway,
find one.
it's 3 minutes behind the starting time, so perhaps we should start anyway. So
Yeah, I
hello.
mean, Alan speaks half the time. Maybe he'd come up to the thing and be the delegate.
Okay.
I saw him there.
So good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and it's RADEXT session at IETF 119, and both chairs are online. And I'm Valery Smyslov, and my co-chair is Margaret Collin. And Alan will act as a delegate in the room, so we shall start. Just a few usual things. A note well. So the session has been recorded, and any contribution, any presentations that are made at this session are a subject of note well. So please know this. And ISG directs chairs to remind participants about the code of conduct at IETF, and so it's just a reminder for you. And meeting details you can find here. So perhaps if you hear, you already know who the chairs are and what is where the meeting slides can be found. And if you're online, that you already know the URL for Miteco, but still, We need to perform some administrative tasks. So blue sheets are collected automatically, and we need volunteers for note takers. So anybody in the room. I cannot see the room, so Alan, probably you can be in a better position. I cannot see any hand. The camera isn't show.
Oh, that's not good. I don't know how to fix that.
Yeah,
Paul.
we can see half of one person and one person very far in the back I can't identify, and maybe a third of another person.
Paul's here.
So-
All right. So volunteers, Zulip scribe, note takers.
I think the subscribe isn't needed because Meteka chat can be monitored. I can monitor Meteka chat, but we still need a note taker.
Note taker, volunteers. Yes. All right, we have one.
Can we get their name just so that later
It's in the chat.
we can? Okay, good.
Okay, then this is an agenda for today. So we have 5 presentations and any agenda button. If not, that we can start. And first, a quick update on the what happens from the last IETF meeting, and the draft RADEXT TLS PSK was sent to ISG for the publication was requested, and the draft RADEXT ILPN radius ILPN is in the status of waiting for write-up. A write-up was published recently by Jan Fred, so I believe it is ready for sending to ASG, and we will do it shortly. And we have adopted a few working group documents, and some of them will be discussed. Issues with some of them will be discussed today. So, shall we start with the presentations? What do you see, Margaret? What do you think?
Sure.
Do you want to add? Okay.
No,
So
that was great.
Oh, okay. The first presentation is an update for datagram radius, datagram TLS for radius. So let me find it. So, Jan Fred.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, this is a quick update on our efforts to make radius TLS, the D is silent, to a proposed standard. Currently, it is an experimental. Next slide, please. So, what happened since the last IETF? Almost nothing. Well, in the last few days, there happened a few things that I didn't catch on the slides. So probably that's something that I will talk about a bit. Can go to the next slide. So what should have happened since IETF 118 and what happened within the last few days, I guess. We wanted to have reviews from participants of this working group. We wanted to compile a list of issues that we have with the experimental drafts. 6613 is radius over TCP, 6614 radius over TLS, and 7360 is radius over DTLS. And from that list of issues, we wanted then to check the current draft if all these issues are handled, and therefore we can actually go forward with publishing this. That hasn't really happened. I mean, Alan was nice enough to go over the document and have some nits. I'm in the process of going over these nits and replying to them. So there's that. You can go to the next slide. So there are some open questions that have been revisited again and again, and I don't know, the working group opinion seems to shift around these. One very big question that we still need to ask ourselves or need to find a definitive answer to is, firstly, we had a consensus call which probably didn't really yield a very reliable result about making TLS and DTLS mandatory for servers and TLS or DTLS mandatory for clients, so that we have maximum compatibility and the clients can actually choose which transport they would prefer, because our assumption is that the Radius servers, the software that's in use in most of them, implements DTLS already, so there's not much of a change. And the clients, the Wi-Fi controllers or whatever appliance they use, they can then decide if they already have a TLS stack in there, then they can just use the TLS stack if they don't want to implement DTLS, or if they think that UDP is a better transport option, then they can just implement DTLS. So that's one open question. The other open question is, should we make TLS 1.3 mandatory? And this is, yeah, a bit of a question from the compatibility point of view, because the original specification in 6614 and 7360 was made before TLS 1.3 was available. I don't know if DTLS 1.3 is complete yet, but the then consensus of the working group, I think, was that we want to have this document to just push the status from experimental to proposed standard, but otherwise leave everything as is, as long as it isn't broken or should be revisited, because there is a serious problem with that.
Yeah, this is Alan. I think there are a number of reasons for making TLS 1.3 mandatory and making both mandatory for servers. There aren't that many servers, and if you don't implement them on the servers, the clients have nothing to use, right? If both are optional for the server, then there's no reason for the clients to use one or the other, or TLS 1.3, because the common servers won't support it. So I think, given there are many, many more clients than servers, it's probably best to make all of that mandatory for servers, and then that gives clients the option and the upgrade path.
So you're proposing TLS 1.3 is mandatory to implement, or TLS 1.2 and 1.3 is mandatory to implement for servers, and clients can choose, and we say should implement 1.3, but if you want to implement 1.2, then it's fine.
Yeah.
Or, okay.
I think Valerie's next.
So speaking not as a chair, but as a participant. So I think that we should follow guidance that was made in RFC 9325 about using TLS in applications. And it is said that for application protocols, both TLS 1.2 and 1.3 should be supported for now. And for new transport protocols like QUIC, TLS 1.3 is mandatory and not TLS 1.2. So we should not mandate using only TLS 1.3. At least if you want to be aligned with RFC 9325.
Okay. Yeah. So I think that's it for this slide. Oh, Margaret, sorry.
Yeah, I think one of the questions that I have open, I don't know the answer to, is what is the state of, widely available open source implementation of TLS 1.3? I mean, can we realistically make it mandatory at this time for both DTLS and TLS, or only for TLS, or?
I don't think there is good open source implementation of DTLS available, at least not for OpenSSL as far as I know. I might be wrong.
So there's no DTLS at all, not just 1.3?
This is
Because
Alan.
I'm feeling we shouldn't make things mandatory that there's not a good open source implementation for them, because that means that, I mean, I just think that isn't realistic, right? That's just my opinion, though. I'm sure Alan leapt up to disagree with me. So
No, I think there's a good point. OpenSSL supports TLS 1.3 over TCP. Yeah, I don't think they support 1.3 for DTLS, but they do support 1.2, although it's been, the status of the DTLS implementation has been less than functional at times. But I believe with OpenSSL 3, it's all there. But it's one of these things, following Valerie's recommendation, I think it would be worth saying you have to support TLS 1.3, knowing that the open source implementations can't support it, because at some point they will, and then all the servers should upgrade.
yeah, I mean, there are trade-offs, but
well, one option would be to make TLS 1.3 mandatory, and for DTLS say we don't have enough deployment of DTLS 1.3 yet to make it mandatory. So for DTLS, it's okay to use DTLS 1.2 with a strong incentive to use DTLS 1.3 when it's available.
what's the fallover behavior? If one implementation implements 1.2 and the other implements 1.2 and 1.3, will they just settle on 1.2? I mean, does that just work?
Should. I'm
But
no DTLS expert, but on TLS it works. I hope it works on DTLS too.
I'm fine with the idea of making both mandatory. If we make 1.3 the only mandatory one, we're going to have a problem with people who do 1.2 because they don't have an upgrade path yet.
Yeah. Okay.
A last minute comment. RFC 9325 suggests that DTLS 1.2 must be supported, and TLS 1.3 should be supported. So we should just borrow this recommendation. 1.2 must, 1.3 should is quite strong word. So if it is implemented, it's support, use it TLS 1.3.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I have the reference to, what is it, 9235? 9325, yeah, the use TLS in applications RFC. I have the reference in the draft. I currently just say follow the recommendations from there. Alan quite rightly pointed out that maybe I should tell which recommendations exactly. But I think it's worth revisiting that document and looking through which recommendations are given there, and then copying a bit of text into the this draft. Okay, I think that's it for this slide. And the next slide. Okay, now we have reviews. We have some open questions or at least something to do before we can actually go to working group last call and then through the publication process. But yeah, we definitely need reviews. If you have the time, please read the document, see if there's anything. And once we have completed these reviews, I think we've sat over this document long enough that we should just maybe even try running a working group last call. And if that fails, then we at least know that we still have work to do. But I think the document is mature enough. We still need to collaborate or to correlate the existing documents. Alan has agreed to do that when he has the time. So after that, I think then we should be finished with this document.
I just wanted to, is Paul there in the room at this point?
Yeah.
Because I think that it might be useful to ask for a security director review on this sooner rather than later, because I imagine there might be opinions. I don't know. What do you think, Paul?
Paul. So I'm not sure if a sector review is really the best way, because it is sort of random who you get assigned and it's still only one person. And I think you might want a little wider discussion here to settle on this. So for instance, maybe even like sending a message to the TLS working group so that you get a better idea of like in what state the various implementations and availability is.
Yeah, I mean, that actually sounds like a great idea. Is Valerie and I could write to the TLS
And
working group chair, see if they'd be willing to run it.
I think that I can distribute this document in the Utah working group that is definitely related using TLS and applications, and just ask for reviews.
Okay. I think that would be good if we can get. We really just want a group of TLS folks to look at it and tell us if they see any issues. And then, of course, we want working group reviews too, because we want a group of Radius folks to look at it and tell us if there are any issues. But I think before we go to working group last call, we should try to get some TLS folks to look at it. So if Valerie, if you can do that, I think that would be a good next step. Do you think so, Jan-Fred?
Yeah, I think so. We still have the reviews that Alan sent over the list this week, so I think we should hold submitting that until I've managed to put in all the reviews. But I am committed to do that shortly after the meeting. So
okay, so send us, or the working group or the chairs, whatever seems easier, a note when you feel it's ready for that TLS review, and then we will get it out to the TLS folks.
okay, and I think that's it from me, at least. If there aren't any questions about this document, then I'm through. Okay.
So, Alan, can you see any hands in the room?
So we're asking.
Okay. If there are no questions, then the next presentation is reverse score.
Okay, this is the reverse COA draft, which hasn't really changed. Next slide. Yes, Valerie, can we do the next slide? Maybe not. Thank you. So no real changes since IETF 116. There are multiple interoperable implementations. This draft does not depend on any other documents. It wouldn't hurt to get some other people to comment on it, but largely it's functional. So to review, the issue we're trying to solve is you have a client behind a NAT. It can talk to the server, send access request, accounting packets. Now the server decides it doesn't like a user on the NAS and can't reach it because none of the reverse paths are routable because there's a NAT or firewall in the way. And this document goes, well, you have a TLS connection, just shovel the COA packets down the TLS connection. Turns out it works reasonably well. There are some issues with routing across multiple hops, but those are all solvable. Paul.
Paul, speaking as individual, I'm a little confused by having both the bullet point, we need additional review, and the has been shipping for 2 years in like these big vendors. Why are you waiting for additional review?
Fine, publish it. Yeah, so what happened was I had worked with engineer from Cisco to implement this. Cisco implemented it in some of their hardware. Heki had tested it with the Aruba equipment, which worked. It's in FreeRADIUS. Mostly seems to be interoperable. Not that people talk about it much, but it's not that hard to have a TLS connection and accept packets on it. And if you accept packets and reply, then that's 99% of it. So I'd be happy to do a working group last call and push it out. And if anyone complains, well, that's what the last call is for. Okay. I think that's it, but next slide. I don't know if there's much else, Valerie. Oh, Margaret. Sorry, did not see that. Margaret.
I was gonna say, I have read this document, and I think it's ready for working group last call as an individual. So, as a chair, I'd be happy to send it to working group last call if the author also believes it's ready for working group last call.
Yeah, I think it's ready then. Great. You can do that Monday. Ship it. Oh, do it now. Okay, that's it then. Decision made. Move on.
Okay, so the conclusion is that we will send this document to the working group last call.
Yeah,
Okay,
after
so
the
next
meeting, of course, not
yes,
today.
yes, sure. So the next presentation is deprecating insecure practices.
Yes.
And again, Aaron.
Yay. Next slide, please. So the document's closer to being done. It is not done. There are additional thoughts about MD5 that I guess will be going in shortly, maybe, depending on if we get closure on that. I think it's probably a good idea to publish this along with TLS Biz. So they're published at the same time next to each other because they really do form a unit. And this was Bernard's comment of you can't really deprecate something until you have something new. So TLS Biz could be RFC X and this could be RFC X plus 1 and then refer to that. MD5 is only getting worse over time. It's a miracle that thing still works. I can't say anything more polite than that because this is public and I don't like cursing in public. Next slide, please. Oh, Margaret, do you have a comment? Yes.
Yeah, I would argue that it actually suggests other things than just use DTLS, and that it depends, I guess, how long it's going to be before DTLS is published, because I actually think there's kind of a burning need for this to be published as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And if we're going to get DTLS out in the next month or two, we could wait for it. If we feel like it's stalling longer than that, I think we might put this out, and then, if you want to update it to reference those other two docs, we could probably spin it quick. Or the other combined doc, we could probably spin it quick and add that reference if we needed
Yep.
to, or we could reference the original documents and the draft.
Yeah. Yanford.
Yeah, I think getting this out quickly is a good incentive to finishing the TLS BIS draft quickly. So I would opt to really publish them as together. Yeah, because if we have this experimental that we reference, I don't like the sound of that.
I think one of the differences between the TLS BIS document and the original 6614 and 7360 is that we now have things like 9325, which means that a lot of the application layer TLS issues are now somewhere else, and we don't have to laboriously go over them ourselves in the document. And that makes things rather a lot better. And realistically speaking, it's one of these things for TLS BIS. If no one speaks up, then the document clearly must be perfect and we should publish it. So I'm happy to put some work in the next month and a half and get that out the door. And to Margaret's other points, yes, there is a lot of other things in this document which describes just how terrible some things are. Things like MS Chap, based on stuff that came out a few years ago, which I hadn't seen until about 6 months ago. MS Chap can be cracked with a laptop in a couple of milliseconds and 100 gigs of disk space. So if you're sending bare MS Chap over the internet, congratulations, everyone has your password. Margaret.
Yeah, I was going to say MS Chap is not really better than plain text passwords. And this is the stuff I'm saying is like a burning fire. We see MS Chap occasionally sent over the network. So it would be really nice if we had something to reference that we could make a strongly worded recommendation not to do it and not just be expressing our own opinion.
Yes. Okay, next slide. I don't think there's much more. Yeah, changes since last IETF 118 maybe. Not much. The original focus was deprecating UDP and TCP. There's tons of other stuff now on MS Chap, PAP versus Chap. Realistically, there's a lot of bad advice on the internet from random people of don't use PAP because it sends clear text passwords over the internet, which is hokey, to be polite, as opposed to using something like Chap where all your passwords in your database have to be in clear text. And we all know what happens when people break into your network. What do they look for? Margaret.
I just didn't put my hand down. Sorry.
Oh, okay, no worries. Next slide, please, Valerie. So it's been accepted as a working group document. It's mostly done. There will be some updates, I guess, over the next month or two. And then, yeah, I believe we should publish this in TLS BIS together. The document's gotten a lot of reviews and follows recommended practices, which are known to the community, but not written in stone yet. I think I agree with Yanfred. This is good reason to help push TLS BIS forward. And I think that's it, Valerie. There may be one more slide as a Q&A, but.
No more slides.
Okay. That's it. No more questions. 1, 2, 3, hearing none, ship it. Okay. Yes, it works. What's the next presentation?
So the next is about open roaming. So Mark, go ahead.
Hey Valerie, can you hear me? Can you hear me in the room?
Yes, you're fine.
Okay. Yeah, so I thought I would have one of my other co-editors joining us from Bruno, but I saw him appear momentarily, disappear. But yeah, we requested some time to share the Open Roaming Internet draft with RADEXT. So thank you for giving us some agenda time. So some background for those not familiar with Open Roaming, albeit that it's been referenced in a number of RADEXT working documents. The objective is to enable ubiquitous Wi-Fi connectivity onto private networks, I guess is the switch. Before Open Roaming, there was, I guess, carrier Wi-Fi using carrier credentials to enable you to authenticate onto Wi-Fi networks using static realms primarily and IPsec. Open Roaming is then around transitioning that to be able to use any identity provider credentials which meet a minimum level of proofing to enable you to roam onto private networks. And so it's an open framework for all providers. So that's providers of Wi-Fi private networks, as well as identity providers to come together and facilitate the authentication of devices onto those access networks. It's based on familiar technologies, so nothing has been invented as part of Open Roaming. So it's based on DNS-based dynamic discovery, and with RADSEC secured with a mutual TLS using WBA PKI, and then using passpoint authentication exchange, EAT-based passpoint authentication exchange over that dynamically established TLS. So familiar technology. So next slide, please. Of course, built on IETF protocols. So based on 821x EAT with passpoint. So 3579, 3580. End user identifiers based on chargeable user ID, and so obviously aware of what Alan is driving in terms of privacy issues in his draft, but we based on CUI 4372. We have a legal framework which is acts as a 5580 out of band agreement. And so we use 5580 location data, location info in the access request to share the ANP location. As a minimum, we require the country code to be identified where users are accessing. That's to enable identity providers to meet their legal obligations to understand if they are operating in embargoed countries that they need to be aware of. But obviously, we support other civic address types as well as geospatial. As we said, dynamic discovery based on 7585. We do recommend operation of DNSSEC across the Federation. We have a slight issue that all of the smartphone handsets that use SIM credentials use a 3GPP-network.org, which doesn't have DNSSEC enabled, and so we can't mandate DNSSEC as part of Open Roaming. We would have liked to have done that, but because GSMA hasn't enabled DNSSEC on its domain, then we can't mandate that, because then we would lose out on the already provisioned smartphone credentials. And obviously, today secured using 6614, 6613 from a RADSEC perspective. And as well as IETF supported using IEEE, so 8211 ANQP for querying networks, as well as Wi-Fi Alliance's passpoint. And in the past, we've exchanged, numerous liaison statements exchanged between Wireless Broadband Alliance and IETF. And we've liaised with Medinas, Catport, RADEXT, as well as Dispatch.
Sorry, Paul, but just a small comment. So I did not read the draft, so I'm not sure if you're actually referring to RFC 4035 as DNSSEC, but we have a nicer one now. That's RFC 9364, which sort of bundles all the DNSSEC references into one RFC for referencing. And that's also a BCP document, so you can also link to it as BCP 237.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Okay, next slide, please. I see we've actually got Bruno on as well now. Good morning, Bruno. Bruno, I don't know if Bruno's on audio and he wants to talk about some background, just because I think he was going to kick off this first piece. Bruno? Or maybe not. So just some background then. So WBA and Bruno is the CTO of Wireless Broadband Alliance. So it launched Open Roaming in June 2020. Then WBA published the vendor-specific attributes for Open Roaming in March 2021. In terms of our involvement with IETF, it was first with the Medinas group, because it was included as, in quotes, an existing solution in the Medinas use case draft 02. So that was back in July 2022, and that triggered us to write a draft. So draft 0 was uploaded in June 2023, and we presented that work to Medinas. Back in Prague, we participated in the IETF hackathon, when Open Roaming was used to investigate the unintentional privacy leakage across the Federation. And then we updated our draft in February with latest requirements to avoid privacy leakage across the Federation. And that's because WBA has updated its specifications and recommendations, and Open Roaming picks those up as well. Next slide, please. Open Roaming, very interested in the working group drafts and the current work within RADEXT. So on Radius DTLS BIS, we'd like to, I guess, formally deprecate TLS 1.1, and obviously the discussions we've just seen in terms of 1.3 in terms of recommendations. Looking at the sections on trusted CA indications for Federation coexistence. We absolutely support verification using realms and discovered targets. However, when we launched the Federation, it was recognized that the support of the subject alt name NAI realm was quite poor, that there was at least one OEM that was supporting subject alt name DNS NAI realm, but others weren't supporting it. And so we actually used the same DNS name to carry the realm or target host name, and those are used for checking. In terms of COA, currently COA isn't supported across the Federation due to very well-known firewall traversal issues that Alan has just described, and we'd like to advocate using reverse COA, and maybe it's a possible future hackathon topic for us to come together and to be able to test not just the current implementations, but more wider deployments of COA. And then for deprecating Radius, we're following the recommendations on minimizing personal identifiable information. We would note that the hackathon results demonstrate that class attribute is being used to leak privacy as well, and therefore our recommendations also cover text on recommendations on use of class attribute as well as CUI.
Hi, Jan-Fred speaking. I would love to discuss a bit further offline subject alt name, DNS name versus NAI realm, because I think the incentive to not really use NAI realm at first was that public CAs will probably never issue a certificate with that attribute because they are incredibly focused on web scenarios and nothing else exists in their point of view. So to include that would be great, but I didn't really have the point of view yet. But I would be happy to discuss that and maybe even include it in the RADEXT TLS-B's draft.
Okay, thank you, Fred. Next slide, please. And so, where are we with the draft? So, it's notionally under the individual submissions editor, but when we recognize if we go individual route, then ISG will ask RADEXT their view on this. Sorry, can we go back to the previous slide? Previous slide, please. Yeah, and so interesting, we just looked at the charter of RADEXT, and it says define best practices for radius roaming and roaming consortia based on experience with radius TLS. So obviously wanting to share with this group in terms of the internet draft and get feedback from RADEXT working group on the internet draft, and then really on the feedback of this team of how to progress the internet draft. Does it meet the criteria for work group adoption? Or should it follow the same ISE route from the likes of EduRoam with 7593? So that's really the feedback that we'd like to get from this group in terms of how we should be looking to progress the draft. Thank you very much.
Juan, go ahead.
Yep. Thanks, Juan Carlos Zúñiga. Thanks a lot, Mark, for the presentation. Speaking on behalf of the of the Medina's working group as co-chair, this work has been discussed over there, and we've seen a lot of good interactions with WBA regarding all these different topics, and specifically about this draft. Many of you are aware of the work in Medina's, but for those that are not, the group is starting to wrap up, and we do see the continuation happening here in RADEXT. This is a much better forum for continuing the discussions and potentially progress this ID. So even though we had a lot of discussions over the last couple of years with WBA regarding open roaming, how to improve the overall architecture protocols, etc., we do think that this is a better place to work on. So happy to hear if you have any other ideas or suggestions on how to cooperate with Medina's, but otherwise we just think that this is the place to continue the work. Thanks.
Hi, this is Alan. So I'm not sure RADEXT would be the right group to officially support this. If we look at the original EduRoam document, it went through, I forget what, well, it sort of went through a working group at the time, but it wasn't officially a working group document. It's just that was the group to review it. So if I believe if RADEXT reviewed it and went, yes, it's okay, then it could be published as an individual document, because it's not really proposing a standard of any kind. It's publishing a specification as to what open roaming has done. And so it's not an official IETF recommendation that everyone should do this. So it should be an individual draft. But yeah, if RADEXT supports it, I don't see why anyone else would object to it.
Thank you, Alan.
I wonder if Paul has any comment on this. I mean, I don't I don't think we should try to recharter this group until we finish our initial mission, at least. But I don't like if people are saying, well, we just review it and it would go forward as an informational draft, that is implying that, I guess you would 80 sponsor it or something. Is I don't know, an informational draft. I'm not, or we decide it wasn't the work, work of the IETF and it could be published as an individual. I'm not sure, all of those choices involve you supporting that choice. And I don't want to tell a group from the WBA that will review their document and it will magically be published by the IETF unless we're either going to 80 sponsor it or agree that it's something that could be published, on the independent stream.
So, so I'm not making any formal statements here on this. I would like to talk a little bit more with the people involved and read the content a bit more carefully before I would say where the document should go. The only thing I do want to say is that it was my understanding when I became chair of this group that there was a serious deadline to get things done for to get it done in like WPA Alliance, Wi-Fi Alliance organization. Yeah. So anything delaying that will definitely be pushed down to rechartering, and we should get the other work done first.
Right, that's what I was saying. Is I don't think we should recharter now.
No, I won't let you recharter until you've got these documents out, right, and you're ready. Yeah. But after that, we can talk about rechartering. Like everything's on the table.
Yeah. So that's I think we have to say we're not going to take this on as a working group work item now because we're not going to recharter now to add new work items. So the question is, probably you guys should talk to Paul and see if it's a better path to ask for reviews here and move it forward as some type of informational document, or whether you want to wait until we get DTLS out and talk about whether to recharter this group to work on that document.
And I just want to add another criteria. So if you get this draft adopted by this working group or other working group, you should understand that in this case you pass the control of this draft from WBA to IETF. So perhaps I don't know whether it is acceptable for WBA because as far as I understand, I haven't read the draft yet. The WBA is mostly responsible for developing this technology and to remain in control for further development of this technology. So probably independent submission is the best way so that WBA remain this technology in control, any change of it. And of course, the RADEXT working group should review, and if participants have enough time with all our deadlines, we'll be happy to review this draft and make our recommendations.
Thank you.
Next presentation is 5G AK attributes. Who will be presenting?
Yeah, I'm Sri Gundabelli. Yeah.
Sri, yes, go ahead.
Sorry, I lost my voice, but I'll try. Next slide, please. So the context is essentially, if you look at private 5G is making it into enterprise environments. So in that, essentially, there's already a deployed infrastructure like Wi-Fi, access points, controllers, and AAA. In that environment, if 5G makes into that environment, how can we reuse the existing infrastructure? If you look at it, almost every enterprise today, it's a radius-based infrastructure. It's not diameter-based. That's one thing. Now, if you can look at the types of authentication methods that are supported in Wi-Fi today, right? It's just what is missing is, from 5G point of view, is the SIM-based authentication. Next slide, please. So these are the access architectures. The first one is the 5G system architecture. The next one is the Wi-Fi architecture with there's a client, access point, a wireless LAN controller, and a AAA. Now the question is, if Wi-Fi is already existing in these environments. If we bring in 5G to these environments, do we need a new authentication function, or can we reuse of the existing authentication infrastructure? So the advantage is if we can reuse, if we can make use of the existing infrastructure, there's a way to correlate device identities. For example, a device can come in over Wi-Fi or come in over cellular P5G. If the infrastructure is on the back end is the same, you'll be able to correlate both identities. Next slide, please. So I think what we want to accomplish is the following. Mainly, there's Wi-Fi, there's 5G, there's a common AAA-based infrastructure. Today, how you configure the enterprise credentials for a Wi-Fi user or an Ethernet user, we should be able to configure the same SIM-based credentials to the AAA entity, radius-based AAA server. If we can do that, I think we can eliminate a bunch of additional nodes. And again, from management point of view, from enterprise IT, it will be a saving. So one additional context is in WBA, we have completed the convergence study of Wi-Fi and 5G convergence. These use cases were thoroughly explored, and a document is published. I think what we are looking for is a standardized radius attributes for supporting 5G authentication methods in AAA. Next slide, please. So what is proposed is a set of attributes that the server needs to support. So if you look at 5G ACA is the main protocol that's used in 5G networks. It is like in LTE, it's EPS ACA, and 5G, it's 5G ACA. So I think if you generalize it, there's an authenticator in the middle and there's a authentication server. That's all to it, but you can ignore the entire 3GPP jargon, but largely it's another method. The way you want to look at it is 5G ACA is just another authentication method. So next slide, please. So this is the overall call flow. I think there is there's a endpoint. The U is the client, and there's a AMF is the authenticator and the radius server. What we configure is a couple of parameters, the SIM credentials on the server, and this is how the exchange looks like. All the radius attributes are between the AMF and mainly the radius server. So we have defined the method, and we have in fact implemented this in the free radius some time back. So we didn't post it back to the open code base, but we did implement this in free radius. So now we want, essentially some the IETF community to open this up. I think this should be non-controversial. I think all we are saying is enterprises today use only radius-based infra. We cannot deny that for if somebody wants to bring in another access technology, we cannot mandate that you should support another set of protocols or you require another authentication function. I think that's the goal here. That's a motivation. So I think I presented this in IETF San Francisco. I think looking for some feedback, and once I'm hoping this can be adopted as a working document. Next slide, please. I think this is mainly the attributes, some bits and bytes. I think the document is in a it's in a good shape. A lot of work went into that. We are trying to do one more update, but we could not do it in time. But we'll do it after this IETF. So next slide. I think that should be. Yeah. So I think these are some of the the next steps with respect to document work. So again, we want some feedback from the community and also from the chairs and the AD, and like, if we'll be able to take up this work.
So this is Alan. I'll ignore whether or not it should be a working group document right now. Yeah, I've read the document. It looks pretty straightforward. Here are some attributes. Here's how they're sent in an access request, how they're sent in an access accept. There's not a lot there. Maybe some minor tweaking.
Sure.
Things like it should add message authenticator,
Yeah.
because otherwise the packets are unsigned. Yay, MD5, whatever. But other than that, it's just,
Right.
yeah. This, I think, should be relatively non-controversial. It's not changing anything in the Radius protocol. It's just largely defining new attributes and how you use them.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Alan. Yeah, I think yeah, these are the types of comments from experts. If you can, incorporate them into a specification, it will be useful to the community.
I read the document just as an individual. I read the document before the last meeting, and I'm sure there are details that would be found in, having a bunch of eyes review it. But I also thought it was a fairly straightforward and good document. I think what we ended up saying at the last meeting was more or less the same thing we just said, is that we're not taking on new work items until we get DTLS out. So both groups of people, the very best thing that you could do to get your documents considered is review DTLS and help us get it out. Because we're not taking on anything else until we get it out, because it's needed, I think, for June publication, and it's currently March, and we don't have it out. So,
Okay.
so that would be my advice to you.
Yeah.
I have no
Thanks.
objection to the working group taking this on after that. My
Thanks,
own
thanks,
document.
Margaret. Yeah.
Technically, we adopted my own document, but we're not doing anything with it till we get DTLS out, because we've got to get that document out.
Okay. No, I understand. Thanks, Margaret. Yeah. Right.
Roland Schott here. I haven't read your document, but I'm really a little bit surprised. I have just some clarification questions. I see that BBF is working on some issues like 5G RG, and they're looking for also devices behind the 5G RG and the 5G RG. My question is your work inspired also by the BBF activity? Have you seen the things there? First question. Second question, the EMF, does it support radios at itself? Because normally different protocols or different authentication mechanisms. Just want to clarify. And if not, yes, then I think it's worth also to look in what BBF is doing and specifying.
Right. Yeah, I haven't attended BBF lately. It's been a while, but I'm not in the 5G RG context. Is this relevant? I have to look at it carefully. But maybe there's applicability. Absolutely, I think it opens up another interface. Instead of yeah, can we support SIM-based authentication or radius-based infrastructure?
Okay.
I think I'm pretty sure it's applicable there also. I think yeah, AMF. It may have to support a new radius interface. I agree. It's not a that's not.
It's not automatically, because I see that was intermediate in the end. I was a little bit surprised and thought, okay, we could also build a tunnel or something like this directly to the radio server and allow them some kind. But if you want then include the AMF, then it's necessary. Okay, I agree. I think SIM-based authentication and digest is both more or less somehow feasible or allowed. And in that sense, I feedback what I see if it fits. And, just a small comment.
Right. I think if you look at P5G and Wi-Fi, they're almost like similar environments. Like, it's a standalone, like essentially, right? What the same enterprise manages both the networks. In that sense, like, if you can manage from administration point of view, if you can just configure the credentials in one place, it's all set. So it's a saving. I think it eliminate a bunch of additional functions and operational simplicity.
So I think I will read your draft.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you so much.
So we've done with the presentations. And any other business?
This is Alan. Can we please get people to review the TLS draft, or we'll come find you down?
I mean, all of you just got 25 minutes of your life back. If you stay in the room, you could probably read the detailist draft in that time.
Sure.
But anyway, I
So,
think unless something else, Valerie, we're done for today, right?
yes, we've done for today, and 25 minutes earlier. So you have some time to read the draft as Alan suggested, and Margaret made a good review. So thank you to everybody. Thank to Alan for being a delegate, and thank to everybody who make comments and presentations. And see you next time. And please review the drafts and be active in the mailing list. So
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
thank you. Bye.